Video conferencing facilities are increasingly becoming a standard feature of many boardrooms of small businesses, but a lot of misconceptions around the advantages and disadvantages still exist. To discuss this in detail, I'm joined in studio by Jean van der Veld, and he's Executive Head of the Visual Communications Division at Vox Telecom. Jean, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Jean, before we even get into the nitty-gritties of this discussion, what are the types of video conferencing that are out there?
So currently, probably to explain it, because there's a whole lot of types of video conferencing available. The easiest way to explain it is to say there's a formal video conferencing world out there, which consists out of your corporates with their boardrooms that they are able to talk to each other. And then there's a much larger, today we find, informal video conferencing world out there, the likes of the Skypes, the GoToMeetings, the applications from Apple, etc., etc. So what's been a challenge all along has been for these two worlds, or to be able to talk to each other. First of all, the formal video conferencing world, where you had these islands of corporates not being able to make a phone call to each other. And those facilities are available today. So it's easier to explain video conferencing looking at those two separate, call it, areas.
Now, given that video conferencing is seen as having or saving time and money, why is there reluctance among small businesses to actually embrace it?
I think the biggest thing is because traditionally video conferencing was implemented as a communication tool for large corporate. So obviously what happened was technology was expensive. So first of all, your price point is expensive to have a boardroom with all the flashy toys and bells and whistles that's needed. Now a small business can't afford that kind of thing. Secondly, for a small company to be able to do video conferencing, you need bandwidth in order to do that. Now, traditionally overseas, it's easier. It's cheap. South Africa now, it's coming down very nicely. So now we are able to provide high quality bandwidth to small companies in order to have these kind of facilities. And of course, there's various models available today from an equipment perspective. You can either buy the hardware and still go that route, which are much let's call it less costly these days than it was years ago. Secondly, you can opt for an hosted option, or you can go on a rental model where you actually don't own the equipment. You purchase it the same way you would have a TV that you would rent, or any other service for that sake of the matter. Yeah. So there's various models that's been made available to enable small business to get into this market.
Let's talk about the benefits, because I'm sure there are. And for a lot of small companies out there who are thinking maybe it might be costly, there should be benefits of actually
There are obviously benefits, but I think in order to explain why there's such a massive drive for video conferencing worldwide, you know, one of the leading network providers or network equipment providers in the world do a survey every year, and their predictions indicate, which is fairly spot on every year, is that by the year 2014, 66% of the traffic internationally that will be running over the networks will be video. So, and that need and that want's been driven by the consumer. Things like Skype, that's got 630 odd million users that at any given stage have approximately 44, I think the last report is 46 million people talking to somebody else. And I think before we go into the further development of, you know, just where this is going, is we need to understand the concept of communications. We all use telephones today as a stock standard, as it's second habit for us almost. If you don't have a cell phone or a telephone, it's almost, you know, it's unheard of. But it's interesting to know that the very first phone call that ever took place was Mr. Alexander Bell phoning his assistant, and what he said was, "Mr. Watson, come see me." So the trick is innate in our human what we want, what we need, is we want to talk to somebody else face to face. There's a different dynamic that takes place in that environment. And the technologies that's available today is just an enhancement of the traditional telephone conferencing that we did. So it's just taking us that step further.
Now, Jean, just very quickly, how should an SME be approaching video conferencing in this time?
I think what should happen is, obviously there's lots of products out there in the market. I think SMEs need to first of all understand, is video communications, is it something that they want to use and that they will use? It's coming, it's happening, worldwide it's deploying, there's massive growth. The question they need to ask themselves, am I a small business that do talk to a large corporate in any environment? Number one, so I need an application that can talk back to a boardroom from my PC at the office, or even a very inexpensive deployment system in my boardroom. The second thing they need to consider is, do I have sufficient bandwidth in order to do this? It's the same experience as we had originally with telephones or cell phones where you phone and it breaks up, etc. If you do not have proper connectivity, you're going to experience that. So get somebody in that's a specialist to look at your network and advise you according to that. Then what I would also say is don't sign yourself into expensive contracts. Look for the cheaper options, the hosted models that's out there. You know, we've got products today available in the marketplace that'll give you high definition video conferencing, unlimited calls per month in a secure environment. In other words, I can speak to all my branches and know that I'm not being hacked, and or speak to a boardroom for as little as 170 Rand a month.
Interesting.
So those things are available.
Great. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
All right. That was Jean van der Veld, and he's the Executive Head of the Visual Communications Division at Vox Telecom.